At his wife's funeral, the man stood in front of a mirror trying to force a few tears out of his eyes. But no matter how hard he squeezed, not a single tear came out. That was when he started wondering if he had ever truly loved his wife at all. 2 days earlier, he and his wife had been driving when they were suddenly involved in a terrible car accident. His wife died right in front of him. Miraculously, he walked away without a single injury. And even now, standing outside the hospital room, he still felt absolutely nothing inside. When he noticed blood on his shoes, he calmly bent down and wiped it off with a tissue. Feeling a little hungry, he walked over to a vending machine to buy a chocolate bar. But the candy got stuck and never dropped down. He went to complain to the hospital staff, only to be told the machine didn't belong to them and that he should contact the vending company himself. So he returned to the machine and took down the company's phone number. On the day of the funeral, the entire hall was filled with sorrowful music and crying relatives. Everyone around him was devastated. But Davis felt like the whole thing was strangely theatrical and fake, because deep down he couldn't feel a thing. He wanted to fit into the sadness around him. He wanted to understand the pain of losing someone he loved. But no matter how hard he tried, there was only emptiness inside him. Even the funeral music sounded irritating instead of emotional. Trying to match the atmosphere around him, Davis walked to a mirror and attempted to squeeze tears out of his dry eyes. But after struggling for a long time, he still couldn't cry. The ridiculous sight even made a nearby child laugh at him. And at that moment, Davis suddenly realized something terrifying. Maybe he had never truly loved his wife. Maybe this funeral was nothing more than a meaningless performance to him. As he stood there completely lost, his thoughts somehow drifted back to the broken vending machine at the hospital. So despite how inappropriate it seemed, he decided to write a complaint letter to the vending company. In the letter he wrote, "Dear Champion Vending Company, I am writing regarding a terrible experience at St. Andreas Hospital." He carefully explained how he inserted 5 quarters into vending machine number 7 outside the intensive care unit and pressed B2, expecting a pack of peanut, only for nothing to come out. He wrote that he was especially upset because he had been starving at the time, and because his wife had died only 10 minutes earlier. What should have been a simple complaint somehow turned into pages of deeply personal memories. Instead of only describing the broken machine, Davis found himself writing about everything between him and his wife, how they met, how they fell in love, and the small moments that filled their marriage. Those memories slowly poured across the page like water. Even stranger, the very next day, Davis returned to work as if nothing had happened. He casually told his assistant to mail the letter for him while his co-workers stared at him in shock. Most people expected him to take time off after losing his wife. But Davis not only showed up to work, he seemed even more energetic than before. Later, his secretary gently suggested that he should probably rest for a while. Davis looked genuinely confused. He couldn't understand why everyone around him kept insisting that he needed time to recover. What confused him even more was how emotional everyone else seemed to be. Even his normally cold and serious father-in-law openly cried in front of him. His own father also awkwardly tried comforting him while pretending to water the plants. But to Davis, all of their concern felt absurd, because he simply couldn't understand why everyone was so heartbroken. But slowly, strange things began happening to him. Whenever he casually talked to strangers on the train, the conversation somehow always drifted toward his dead wife. He would tell people that he loved her and that the truly tragic part was not her death, but the fact that he still couldn't feel any sadness. One stranger eventually asked him, "Then what do you feel?" That single question seemed to hit something deep inside him. Without warning, Davis suddenly pulled the emergency brake on the train. The police later questioned him about the reckless behavior, but his explanation was completely incoherent. The officers initially thought he was insane, until one investigator quietly informed them that Davis had recently lost his wife. Suddenly, everything made sense to them. They assumed all of his strange behavior was simply grief manifesting itself in unusual ways. Since nobody got hurt, they eventually let him go with only a warning. But when Davis returned home, the empty house felt strangely lifeless. He sat there eating alone while staring at a decorative seashell his wife once loved. Now it only annoyed him. He opened the refrigerator and noticed one of her reminder notes asking him to fix it, but he ignored it completely. Oddly enough, this emotional numbness made him more aware of the world around him. He suddenly began noticing tiny details he had ignored for years. Strands of his wife's hair tangled in a comb. Squirrels fighting on the lawn. Even a fallen tree by the side of the road somehow fascinated him. This strange new awareness made him feel powerful, almost invincible. So he suddenly decided to fix the refrigerator himself. The problem was, he had absolutely no idea how to repair appliances. The fridge originally only had a tiny leak, but after Davis messed with it for a while, he completely destroyed it and shoved the entire thing onto the floor. But strangely, staring at the broken pieces made him feel incredible. It was as if some invisible pressure inside him had finally loosened. And from that moment on, he became addicted to tearing things apart. He dismantled office computers. He ripped apart squeaky bathroom doors. He even destroyed his wife's favorite coffee machine. But eventually, destroying small household objects was no longer enough. The next day, Davis drove his luxury car to a demolition site and begged for work. He even offered to pay the foreman $50 just to let him join the crew. Deep inside, something kept pulling him toward destruction, as if smashing things apart was the only way he could still feel alive. At first, the workers laughed at him for struggling with a tiny hammer. So one of them handed him a massive sledgehammer instead. The moment Davis swung it, something inside him awakened. Every strike felt like he was releasing years of invisible frustration. The other workers thought he had completely lost his mind, but only Davis understood the strange satisfaction he felt every time something shattered beneath him. During work, a nail accidentally pierced straight through his foot. But instead of screaming in pain, he barely reacted. When they finally pulled the nail out, the only sound that escaped his mouth was relief. Soon after, Davis also started experiencing disturbing hallucinations. He constantly saw visions of his wife everywhere around him. Sometimes his mind drifted back to the beach where they first met. Other times he became convinced that a worm was crawling through his brain, slowly eating away at him from the inside. Terrified, he finally went to the doctor. But after a full examination, the doctor told him something unexpected. There was no worm inside his brain. Instead, the doctor joked that it felt like something had taken a bite out of his heart. The doctor explained that Davis was simply exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed. Physically, there was nothing wrong with him at all. One day, he overheard a neighbor's child playing drums nearby. The rhythm instantly pulled him in like magic. Before he even realized it, Davis found himself moving his body to the music for the first time in ages. For a brief moment, he finally felt alive again. Soon he became obsessed with dancing. He danced in crowded subway stations, in the middle of busy streets, beside noisy construction sites, on staircases, and even on the concrete pillars outside his office building. He completely ignored the judgmental stares from strangers. It was as if dancing had become the only way for him to reconnect with the soul he had lost. Whenever his friends asked if he was okay, his answer was always the same: "I'm fine." But the happiness never lasted long. Eventually, even music stopped making him feel anything. So Davis returned to destruction once again. This time, his target became the mansion he once shared with his wife. Driving a bulldozer straight toward the house, he smashed through the walls. We often misunderstand what it means to move on. We think not crying means being strong. We think going back to normal life means letting go, and we think time will heal everything. But Davis shows us that some things must be taken apart by our own hands before they can be rebuilt, and some grief must be fully experienced before it can truly pass. In the end of the film, he does not become the same respectable banker he once was, nor does he turn into a complete madman. Instead, he becomes something more real, a person who can feel pain, who can cry, who can dance, and who can admit that he once truly loved someone. What people call delayed grief is never the absence of love, but love so deep that it becomes too heavy to touch. It is sorrow so heavy that it needs time just to be held, and it is a broken heart shattered so completely that the pieces must be picked up one by one before a whole self can be formed again. If you have ever experienced a moment when you could not cry, if you have ever wondered whether you are too cold or too numb, remember this: you are not unloving, you are simply not ready yet to face the space that love has left behind. Grief will arrive late, but it will not miss you, and when it finally comes, allow yourself to fall apart, allow yourself to break, because only when you are broken enough can you truly begin to rebuild. So heavy that it needs time just to be held, and it is a broken heart shattered so completely that the pieces must be picked up one by one before a whole self can be formed again. If you have ever experienced a moment when you could not cry, if you have ever wondered whether you are too cold or too numb, remember this: you are not unloving, you are simply not ready yet to face the space that love has left behind. Grief will arrive late, but it will not miss you, and when it finally comes, allow yourself to fall apart, allow yourself to break, because only when you are broken enough can you truly begin to rebuild.